Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Rock Creek Coffee Roasters, home of small batch, freshly roasted coffee. Our guest today is Christine Peterson, outdoor enthusiast and freelance journalist. Christine is also a former president of the Outdoor Writers Association of America. She has written for Outdoor Life, National Geographic, High Country News, and many more publications. Christine, it's a pleasure to finally have you as our guest on the Outdoor Adventure Series. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate your interest and your patience with me.
Well, it's funny because I think we've been kind of planning this for like a whole year. I mean, life just happens. And first off, I want to thank you for taking the time. And I have to ask, are you still decompressing from being the president of the Outdoor Writers Association?
My presidency finished at an opportune time, the beginning of summer. And so I was able to spend most of the summer outside and not worried that I was missing a meeting and didn't have an internet connection. And how was I going to get my computer to the top of the hill so that I could give myself a hotspot to run something? So yeah, it's been good. I miss some of the camaraderie and I am happily filling that time with who knows what else. Oh,
Fantastic.
yes.
Fantastic. Now, I definitely want to talk about your love and your work in the outdoor space and also as a journalist. But if you could, for our listeners, share a little bit about your background and how you got into journalism and especially then began to explore this outdoor passion that you have.
Sure. I've been a journalist for most of my life. I started running a kids page for the Casper Star Tribune, which is the Wyoming state newspaper, when I was 16. And then I interned for them in college and bounced around a little bit after there, but ended up back at the Star Tribune as a city reporter for a couple of years, which is not in the outdoors. But I'm born and raised in Wyoming and spent a lot of my time outside in various ways, mountain biking and backpacking and a lot of camping and hiking and what most people do in Wyoming in the West. And brand new husband and I were traveling for about a year after I left the paper, and I got a job offer to do the outdoor gig if we came home in 6 months, which was sort of the plan, sort of not the plan. And I didn't know, so I spent a 12-hour bus ride from Oaxaca, Mexico to Cancun thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, and got to the Cancun bus station and accepted the job. Spent another 6 months or so on the road and then came back as the outdoor reporter. And that I covered the outdoors then for the Star Tribune in Wyoming for well over a decade before I left to become a freelance outdoor writer. So, and through that has taken me all over the place, but I still live in Wyoming and love the state and love what it has to offer. And the issues that are here are often emblematic of a lot of the issues that are facing the outdoors in certainly in the West, but also all over the country. And so it's a really great place to meet people and understand what they're going through.
Very good. I was born and raised in the Detroit suburbs, and I always joke with who will listen to my joke that on the back of my birth certificate says you must root for a Detroit team. It's the law to root for anybody else. And the reason is Detroit Lions my entire life have they never show up to play football.
Yeah.
In Wyoming, I can imagine on the back of your birth certificate, it says the stamp says, I must love the outdoors.
Yeah.
Because I think I hear everybody that lives in Wyoming, there's some connection to the outdoors from the early in life to wherever they are, whatever they're doing today. Do you find that you were just introduced at a very young age, just given the nature of what Wyoming is as a state?
I do think that. I mean, um there are not very many of us. 500,000 people in a really big state. The joke's always there are more pronghorn than people. There aren't anymore. Pronghorn aren't doing great,
Yeah.
but there aren't a lot of us, and most of us grow up in really rural places. I grew up in the second largest city, which is about 55,000. And but if you don't like to be outside, there's just not a ton to do, especially
Yeah.
depending on where you are.
Yeah.
And so I that most people come here for the outdoors. There's some that come for jobs, but a lot of people come here because they want to be outside and they want what Wyoming has to offer that way. So yes, it is a part of our fabric for sure.
Okay. When you were growing up, did you have the parents, the grandparents, the siblings that just introduced you to a variety of activities? How did the different passions that you have, how did those start to evolve?
Yeah, my parents for sure, and an older brother. My grandparents were on both coasts, and so my parents landed here. They met in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the '60s, and Albuquerque got too big for them, and so they, I kid you not, threw a dart at a map, and it landed in Casper, Wyoming. So my dad applied for jobs there, and they moved. But yes, they had an orange Volkswagen bus,
Uh,
and every weekend loaded my brother and I and the gigantic dogs up in that bus, and we drove somewhere. And in my mind, we were having the grandest adventures. I mean, we may as well have been driving to the Yukon, even though usually it was the backside of Casper Mountain, which was like 30 minutes from our house.
yeah.
And there's a little hammock seat in the front, hammock stretched between the two front seats, and that was where I slept. The top popped up, and that was where my brother slept, and that was childhood. So we spent just a lot of time. Nothing was huge. Nothing was a really big production. It was just a lot of low key adventures that gave us a lot of time to do whatever we
Mhm.
wanted
E
outside.
excellent. Which activity did you kinda gravitate to in the beginning that you really like, "This is fun?"
Camping was always my favorite. That was
Yeah.
what, and still is. We probably camp. I mean, turkey hunting season starts in the middle of April.
Mhm.
And so we usually camp from the middle of April every weekend and big chunks of the summer. My husband's a teacher, and so he has the summers off most of the summer and then into November, which April and November are iffy months in my
Yeah.
state weather-wise. But camping, I think, was always the favorite. And then we mountain biked and Nordic skied a lot growing up. And my husband grew up hunting and fishing. I did not grow up on the consumptive side.
Right.
But then since we got together in college, that has been a great merging of our lives. So now we spend a lot of time hunting and fishing and a lot of time mountain biking and skiing and camping.
I love that. In a little bit, I'd love to hear more about this experience, especially with I know I've seen at least one picture of you with your daughter, but I just love the idea of this little girl getting to do all these cool things, and it's like she's got a smile on her face, and I wanna hear more about that, but speaking of kids, you mentioned that you, had started this, column for the paper, this kids column. Tell us more about that.
Oh, so I mean, that when I was very young, it was a
Yeah,
kids page. So
yeah,
I was actually a designer.
okay,
And there were kids from the community that wrote poems and drew pictures.
okay,
And
okay,
then designed them as a page. Yes. So I have written a lot about motherhood though,
oh,
since we had Miriam, which is my daughter.
okay, very cool. Now, how did you decide to go into journalism?
Um, I wanted it's an interesting question that for some reason I never have a concise answer for.
Eh,
I mean, honestly, probably the quickest answer is my older brother told me to take journalism class when I went to 10th grade. So I
okay,
signed up for journalism. But I mean, I love telling stories, and mostly I love asking people questions.
yeah,
Every I asked everybody questions. I started a newspaper when I was in 4th grade. I don't know why. I think I just wanted a way to ask people questions that weren't socially acceptable for me to just ask them.
mhm,
And for being a journalist gave you a reason to ask questions that weren't socially acceptable. And then as I got older and was maybe able to form a more coherent, mature answer.
Okay.
I feel like it's important to inspire people to go outside, to know what's going on around them. And so it's a mixture of enjoying telling stories
Mhm.
and hoping to affect some kind of change or grow awareness of issues. And then also, frankly, I still just like asking questions. I'm insatiably curious.
Yeah.
So,
I love that answer. I mean, that's what I love the best about podcasting. And also as a business coach, I get to ask questions as well,
oh,
not knowing what the answer is going to be, and you just kind of roll with it. And
mhm,
I think that's why I love like the OWAA as a journalistic organization or any organization, but a lot of it is just built around asking questions,
sure.
and that's fantastic. Now, couple years ago, I don't know whether it's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the the journalism in our country has kind of taken a hit. I mean, a lot of people are being affected by consolidations in newspapers and radio and television. What led to you perhaps walking away? Maybe that's not the right choice of words, but going away from the 4-page journalistic lifestyle where you get a paycheck to this more outdoor freelance lifestyle. What kind of led you to that?
I wanted to I partly I was the last few years that I was at the newspaper, I was the managing editor, and that was a big job and important, but I also wasn't writing very much,
Mhm.
and I wanted to write more. I wanted to write more about the outdoors, and so it was time. Miriam, my daughter, was 2, and I wanted to spend more time with her, and
Mhm.
I wanted to spend more time writing about the outdoors, mostly. And
Okay.
so that was what it just wasn't there wasn't going to be a way for me to do that at the paper full
Okay.
time. I wanted to anymore. And so then this allowed me to write full time about the outdoors and also broaden my reach quite a bit.